I grew up in rural Iowa, the oldest of 5 siblings. We were all homeschooled, which meant that we were generally done with school by noon and spent the rest of the day running around in the woods or fields, creating and exploring. It was a very wild and unencumbered childhood, and I was a fairly wild and unencumbered child. More importantly, it cemented in me an undying love of nature, small towns, in the Midwest. To leave that for Rockford, Illinois, a city that made it to the top 3 of Forbes' most miserable cities in America list more than once, was just a little less than devastating for me. The movie Spirit, about a wild Mustang forced away from his freedom and his wilderness home, came out less than a year after we made the move. My imaginative and emotional side latched onto it, as well as this, the theme song by Bryan Adams. There in Rockford is where I first discovered most of the existential angst that comes with growing into a teenager. In Iowa, it had always been easy for me to make new friends. In Rockford, I don't know if it had something to do with that miserableness Forbes talked about, or if it was just the increasing social complexities of growing up, but I never really found anyone I could call a close friend. I started attending private school in 2005, and it only made me feel more isolated. And that isolation was when I began to really think maybe I've been the problem, maybe I'm the one to blame. But there are a few things I could always count on to make me feel at home again, including when I look at the stars. Given the angst and heartache of our first big move, you can imagine my reaction when I learned halfway through high school that we were going to move again. I was fairly inconsolable that summer, but something incredible happened. We wound up in Petersburg, Illinois, a small town of 2,300, and finishing school there, I met probably the best friends I've ever had in my life. The cynical view of myself and others that I had developed over our 6 years in Rockford began to give way. When I finally realized that I was much better off in that small town with these new people than I was before the move, this song by Need to Breathe quickly became my anthem. After high school wasn't so pretty, I moved to Nashville for a university that wound up being too expensive and completely unlikable, came back to the Petersburg-Springfield area, and basically started from scratch. After a year of total aimlessness, being fired or pseudo-fired from at least 3 menial minimum wage jobs, I began to attend Lindenwood Community College. That's where I met Mark Hardiman, the theater professor, and began to get my life back together. Mark provided me with all sorts of production and PR opportunities in Springfield's community theater world, and in no time my life was busy and fulfilling once again. When I graduated Lindenwood and turned my sights to Lindenwood, I felt like the person Dexter Freebish is singing about. I was so eager to get out and move on, but at the same time, I know now that when things really get hard, home will always be Springfield. With all that behind me now, it's easy for me to identify with American author's indie single Believer. I'm a long way from the innocence of Iowa, and I've certainly picked up a few neuroses along the way, but whatever my worries or insecurities, I have confidence from experience that things will get better. I can't shake my fundamental optimism any more than I could shake the insecurities which seem to contradict it. Whether it's up or down, my life's the only one I get, and I don't want to let it go.